This video will be the first in my new series covering 10 years of early Windows gaming, 1993 to 2002, similar to the ones I've made for Amiga and DOS and are still making for C64. So we'll start with Windows 3.11, then go through 95 and all versions of 98 all the way to XP. It will be a crazy ride, at least from my point of view, as we will start with simple 16-bit games, often based on Windows's interface and cheap FMV titles, and we'll close the series with high-end 3D games using acceleration and various different effects and technologies that I couldn't list here out of top of my head, even if I wanted to. We'll witness rise and fall of 3D effects too, which in itself is an interesting subject too. You will not find any built-in Windows games in the series though, no fully educational titles and a very limited selection of card games, as they're usually not very interesting to a YouTube viewer. Not to bore you to death though, let's get on with it. Castle of the Winds is a game you won't be able to try unless you either have an older real 16-bit Windows 3.11 based computer, or you run it in a virtual machine or under DOSBox along with the full Windows installation. All because its executables are 16-bit and our modern 64-bit systems are not compatible with their binaries anymore. But if you manage to get it to run, you may actually be positively surprised. Not with graphics or sounds, as graphics are early Windows appropriate, so not very good, and sound is virtually non-existent, but with everything else. Castle of the Winds is a top-down, entirely randomized and seemingly endless RPG. You start by creating a character for yourself, distributing points between stats, picking name and gender, and from then onward everything is randomized. Level maps, item drops and monsters stats, everything. And you keep exploring the game, fighting more and more difficult monsters, gathering loot and getting stronger, seemingly forever, or until you die. Cause I've never found an end to it. Its sequel had one, but I don't think the first Castle game does. In some aspects it's very similar to Diablo with that endless loop of random, but it's played in turns. Castle of the Winds is a surprisingly fun and addictive title despite simple presentation. Give it a go! Early 90s were a time of full motion video boom. Everyone thought that these games would be the future and everyone made them. The market was flooded with hundreds of these, and because of the number of games released alone, quite a few of them were really bad. Either acting was subpar or gameplay was odd, clunky and not thought out. Critical Path, an interactive movie adventure with some action sequences, fortunately is not that bad. It's not great either, it's average. An average in a sea of bad is, well, good. The game takes place on an island in post-nuclear world, where you crash landed your helicopter on the roof of a factory. Your copter needs a small part to be functional again, but since you're wounded, you send your partner Kat to get it. From this point onward, Kat sets out to find it, while you, wounded and in pain, stay in the control room helping her from within. So while you'll be solving various simple puzzles, Kat will be shooting and fighting enemies, setting traps, and overall trying to find and bring back the part while staying alive. Critical Path is definitely not the best FMV game out there, but it's not a bad one either, and it can be fun completing it once. Police Quest Open Season is the fourth installment in Sierra's point-and-click series of adventure games. This time you're John Curry, a homicide detective of LAPD, and you find your partner, Officer Bob Hickman, murdered in an alley in a southern part of the city. An 8-year-old boy has been murdered as well. You begin investigation into the case that eventually leads you deep into criminal belly underworld of the city on a hunt for a maniacal murderer. This time, even more than in previous games, focus is placed on realistic police procedures, so you'll spend a lot of time examining crime scenes and questioning suspects, which I suppose, at least for me, is half of the fun. The presentation has been considerably improved and the game now offers fully digitized locations and characters, adding to the realism and tension of investigation. Typically for Sierra, there are sections in the game where you can find yourself doing something that will result with your character dying. Unlike in all other Sierra's games, however, I can thematically see a reason for that, so it doesn't bother me as much. If you're into adventure games or, well, police work, Open Season is definitely worth a look. Earth Invasion is an action arcade game that features 3 entirely different kinds of shooters in one package, all accessible from within the main menu as missions. First is very similar to Galaga or Galaxian, with your ship at the bottom half of the screen shooting enemies coming from above. Second mission is side view and more similar to Defender than anything else, so you can turn around and fly in both directions, left and right, while defending citizens of the planet and shooting enemies. In third, you play in first-person view, straight from the cockpit of your fighter, in which you chase retreating enemies, shooting them down. While Earth Invasion offers quite a few weapon upgrades and ship power-ups to choose from, and an interesting for the time pre-rendered sprites of on-screen objects, I was never particularly fond of it, as it felt like each of the 3 games was incomplete. As if the game had 3 different developers, each with their own gameplay idea, and they couldn't agree on one. So they stuck all of them in, unfinished. It's not the case obviously, but that's how it feels to me. What? Oh, sure, I'll let them know. I'm sure they're dying to hear it. I'm sure you don't care, but my assistant asked me to tell you that, well, he's Batman. Freddy Pharkas' Frontier Pharmacist is a western-themed point-and-click adventure. You play as titular Freddy, once the fastest gunslinger of the West, now a pharmacist wannabe. It's an unusual career choice for a cowboy, but one that circumstances made our Freddy pick, after a particularly bad shootout beat, which he barely survived, losing an ear in the process. The game is divided into 4 chapters, with first 2, and especially the first one, serving as a sort of a introduction to gameplay mechanics. It's also an excellent and filled with witty dialogues and humor parody of the West. The story is interesting, placing you in the very center of the plot, involving unknown force that rapidly drives people off the town of Korsgold. Freddy Pharkas is really fun, and you can expect to laugh out loud often, and both because of fun interactions with objects and characters, and hundreds of hidden gags, pop culture references and inside jokes. And no wonder, as it was made by the legendary Al Lowe of Leisure Suit Larry Games. You know what, I know it's a risky statement given the cult status and popularity of Larry, but I believe that Freddy Pharkas' Frontier Pharmacist is Al Lowe's best game. Here you go, I said it. You can destroy me in the comments if you'd like. But keep in mind that Batman is my assistant, and he doesn't take well to extra work he has to do editing my replies to all the comments. Also, as I forgot to mention it, but it may be obvious, but what you're seeing, the game is pretty nice and stands out from many other early Windows titles presentation-wise. Gabriel Knight's Sins of the Fathers is a game that I first saw in a gaming MacBook when I still had an Amiga, and I instantly became jealous of PC users. Supernatural themes mixed with a bit of humor and a lot of mature detective work in a modern point-and-click game were sparking my imagination like no other title at the time. All that coupled with spectacular graphics promised an incredible adventure and a mystery to solve, which I had to wait a few years longer to sample myself, but boy, was it worth the wait. Now, I don't want to mislead you here, as while I've mentioned detective work, you're not a detective per se, but a writer researching voodoo cult for a book. But as you do, you'll quickly spot web of intrigue surrounding it, and whether you want to or not, eventually you'll get to the heart of the mystery. And it's pretty much all that I'll tell you about the plot. Why? Because Gabriel Knight is excellent, and spoiling the gameplay and plot here too much would rob you of a sense of discovery and numerous oh shit moments that you'll no doubt have while playing. The story is so good in fact that it actually could have easily been a very successful movie given the right cast, director and a budget. If you've never played it and have a copy, give it a go. It's an adventure and a half, I promise. I believe that Gearworks is one of the most underrated early 90s puzzle games. Probably because it looks and sounds well below average for 1993. And since it doesn't look very entertaining judging by the screens only, audiences of the time could have easily disregarded it in favor of more colorful, more easily distinguishable from others title. It's a mistake though, as Gearworks is actually a pretty good game and a very enjoyable puzzler. Sure, it may not be the most difficult one, at least initially, and quite repeatable at that, but I always thought of it more as a relaxed puzzler. One you can just get into, go through level after level, letting your mind wander rather than flexing all your brain cells all throughout. If you're looking for a bit of R&R and just don't dig high-octane action games, Gearworks may actually be something for you. Get the Girl looks bad, sounds bad, and guess what? It also plays really bad. But I had to include it as an example of early Windows stinkers. It is, for the lack of a better word, a seduction simulator where you tackle conversations with series of women trying to convince them, to put it lightly, to be with you. Each of them has a different personality and characteristics, so they react uniquely to the same things you can say to them. Unfortunately, the dialogues don't sound realistic at all. They are often what should be cited in Urban Dictionary under a definition of cringe, and seem as if they were conceived by a few horny teens who've never spoke to a real woman. Not saying that's the case here, but not denying the possibility either. But man, fact check it for me buddy when you've done with that pizza, alright? Get the Girl is not a very entertaining title, but one worth experiencing just for the heck of it, as it shares a lot with Sharknado movies that I often talk about when explaining things that are so bad to their core that they ironically become good in some odd and mysterious way. Get the Girl is at times like that. Not all the way through though, so approach it only if you really have nothing better to do. I'm sorry, what? Oh, you didn't find anything. What? Sure buddy, but only if you get off the couch and do some work for once. Do we have a deal? Great. Now, I'm not gonna go into any details or reasoning behind it, but Batman asked me to make sure that you know that he did got the girl. Her name was Catwoman, but he was also known to date Elephant Missy and Porcupine Lady at some point in his long Playboy career, so there's that. Gettysburg, an interactive battle simulation, is precisely that. An interactive, real-time battle simulation depicting the biggest and most important battle of American Civil War, and you can take side of either Union or Confederacy to lead it to victory. or failure, cause you know, in each battle there's gotta be a loser. All the units, terrain, morale, ammunition and every other factor that was historically recorded is recreated within the game to be realistically represented for the simulation purposes. It's clear from the get-go that a lot of attention was put into those details to offer as close to life battle as it was possible in 1993. Gettysburg is played in real time and has 4 speed settings. Each corresponds to number of seconds used to represent a minute of real-life Battle of Gettysburg. The graphics are rather simple, but they don't really need to be overly detailed or complicated in a heavily strategic title. And if you're into very detailed, very accurate historical tactical games, you'll love Gettysburg despite the presentation. It's very difficult to speak about Hellcup as if it was a game. I mean it is, no doubt about that, but there's such a little degree of interaction that at times it feels more like a grainy, heavily compressed, digitized movie than a game. It's even more disappointing when you realize after figuring out correct choices that it can be completed in under an hour. But since most of you don't, and to be honest I don't either anymore, it will be considerably longer. All because of all the trial and error that you'll partake in. Story-wise, you're a traveler. Well, perhaps you're not, but in the game you are, so deal with it. And when you learn that your plane that was supposed to leave from JFK in New York was delayed, you decide to take a cab ride throughout the city and take in the sights. As it turns out, the driver works for the devil, and when you realize that you had no money to pay for the fare, you made a bad deal with him. And now you'll have to travel to different time periods to save your soul. Hellcup is a collection of FMV clips that are interrupted by some very basic and not very entertaining action sequences. The story, while odd, is not that bad, so if there's anything making the game worth experiencing, it is it. When I'll say that Hoyle Classic Card Games is just that, series of 8 classic card games, I'm sure many of you will skip to the next title in this video. And I understand that, as not everyone likes card games. But those that do are in for a treat. Because while there's not much technically speaking that can be done to reinvent the rules of these, the choice of titles and presentation is top-notch, so playing Hoyle Classic is a blast. The games on choice are Bridge, Euchre, Old Maid, Gin Rummy, Hearts, Cribbage, Crazy 8s and Klondike. And while Hoyle Classic is exclusively single player, you can measure yourself against the CPU, playing versus either old-timey stylized characters or Sierra's owned heroes from their other games. Hoyle had a DOS version released the very same year too, and if you have a choice, I'd recommend sticking to Windows for convenience. Other than that, they're both identical. Calling Iron Helix an action game feels weird, as it's a collection of static screens and an occasional video clips depicting action. But they're mostly images, so... Anyway, Iron Helix is an action thriller with a very unusual setting and a plot. One of the deadliest and most dangerous military ships has gone bad, with all of its crew dying from an unknown mutagenic virus. Even worse, a different kind of a virus, a computer virus, overtook craft's internal systems and is about to destroy the world with ship's considerable and deadly armament. Your ship is the closest, so you have to deal with it. But you're no hero, you're a simple cargo holder. I mean, of course you are a hero, but in the game you're not. So don't take it personally. Anyway, the logic behind the cargo sailor being the best one for such an important job is as suiting as sending all drillers on an asteroid in space to blow it up with nukes. But whatever, it is what it is. So you're sending a maintenance robot drone to the ship to penetrate it, figure out all the locks and defenses, overcome them and stop the potential world-ending event. You'll be remotely going about the ship, learning what happened, opening passages and looking for a way to solve the puzzle that this whole scenario is. Some of the data ports you'll investigate will require you to gather DNA samples from late crew members to access them, so there's that too. Every time you access any data point, ship's self-defense system will send a robot that will try to eliminate your drone. So you'll have to always think a few steps ahead, plan your moves to learn and figure out as much as possible while avoiding distraction. Despite the odd starting off point, Iron Helix is actually an excellent thriller, and if you enjoy movies in a genre, you'll fall in love with this game too, I think. King's Quest VI, Heir Today, Gone Tomorrow is a point-and-click adventure game. Story-wise, it's as good as expected, not in small part thanks to legendary Roberta Williams, who was responsible for the best Sierra games. The most interesting part of King's Quest VI, however, is how the game is designed. Almost half of all puzzles is optional, many of them have more than one solution, and because of game's open-world design, they can be completed in any order. Even better, more or less midway through the game, you'll be able to choose to follow the longer, more puzzle-oriented, or shorter story path. The longer results in more satisfying game ending, but many of the parts of the ending are based on the choices taken throughout the game, so they can vary considerably each playthrough, if different riddles are solved and especially if they're completed in different ways. While King's Quest VI is nowhere near being the best adventure game for PC, it's definitely one of the more interestingly designed ones. It features incredible sound design with fully voiced cast on the CD release and beautiful 256 color VGA graphics. Lost Secret of the Rainforest is the sequel to EcoQuest: The Search for Cetus that we spoke about in one of the past episodes of the DOS Gaming History series. The game stars same protagonists, Adam and his father Noah Green, and is also a point-and-click adventure with a very prominent pro-eco background. You play as Adam and once again get separated from your father while on expedition into the rainforest. If constantly losing your kid in dangerous places is not a reason to contact Child Protective Services, I don't know what is. Anyway, you decide to venture deeper into the rainforest, where you learn that the so-called forest heart is dying and that it can only be saved by the tribe known as Grove People. You quickly learn that you'll need to find mysterious legendary city of gold for the Grove People to be able to save the forest heart, so you set out to do just that, Goonies style. So without preparation or any means of understanding what you're up against. Lost Secret of the Rainforest, same as its predecessor, is aimed at kids and young teens, so it's not very demanding. Puzzles usually have pretty easy to figure out solutions, but to counteract it, they're very varied. And not only limited to juggling items in your inventory. You can't get irreversibly stuck or die in the game either. But even though it's aimed at younger audiences, it's actually a pretty fun, light-hearted adventure accompanied by beautiful audiovisual presentation that not many titles in the genre could compete with in 1993. So if you like adventure games, care for the environment, or have a kid somewhere around getting bored with no access to a tablet or a smartphone, give the game a chance. You may have by now realized that sadly many of the early Windows games were not great. And trust me when I say that the worst stinkers are not even included in this video. But the early days for Windows gaming were not easy. We did not have 30-bit system or DirectX libraries, and at least when compared to DOS, Windows back then was not well-suited system for gaming. But as we go through the series episode by episode, year by year, especially from 1995 onward, the tides will turn and all gaming will slowly start moving towards Windows as a more feature-rich, better platform. That will take time though. Today we're talking about 1993, or a part of it really, and a gaming subject is MagnaFlux Runner, which sounds like a condition that will send you straight to the toilet when overdosing on magnesium. But believe it or not, it's not. It's a two-player top-down arcade racing that had some neat ideas but overall ended up being rather blunt and disappointing. The cars raced against each other over numerous laps and they can shoot and drop mines. They are both also targeted by a cannon and laser and can be damaged by floating clouds and a brick wall too. If that wasn't enough, there is also an electromagnet that affects their driving trajectory, turning on and off periodically. All that makes for a very frustrating and hardly entertaining racer that could work if it was better designed, but it didn't, cause it wasn't. Kinda like Batman, now that he does not fight crime. He could have been a great hardworking employee, but isn't, cause he doesn't. Yeah, Bruce, whatever, I don't pay you anyway. Microsoft Arcade is rather basic and not imaginative collection of 5 classic arcade titles with some background information about them. And I say that they're not very creative in their design because they are basically just original arcade games moved to Windows. One could argue that they did not need changing, and I get that, but a little novelty or an extended extra game mode would be nice. Something to make it feel more than a straight-up conversion. That said, as sports go, these are very good, and arcade perfect nearly in every aspect. Included background information and trivia on the games is a fun little bonus too. Oh, and I realize I haven't mentioned the included games yet. They are Asteroids, Battlezone, Centipede, Missile Command, and Tempest. If you enjoy arcade games, especially those that came out late 70s, early 80s, Microsoft Arcade is definitely something for you. I love golf games. I love them alone, I love to play them against others, they're my jam. Kinda like any jam is Batman's jam, as he seems to be munching on anything crunchy and or sweet, and jam fulfills at least one of these two requirements. Come to think of it, you know what he told me recently? That he invented a new kind of a sandwich. Instead of PB&J, he made J&J, and just used 2 different flavors of jam. You gotta give him that while he may not be hardworking anymore, he definitely is still creative. Anyway, as I was saying, I love computer and console golf games, which may be a bit odd as I never played it in real life. Always wanted to, but the clubs are expensive and I hardly ever have free time, so I sorta always pushed it away for later, and it's been years since I first thought of it, and still aren't any closer of playing it. Microsoft Golf Multimedia Edition is basically Link's 386 Pro, but for Windows and a little lighter on the courses. And it's not an overstatement because Bruce Carver from Access Software dipped his toes in it. And he is responsible for both legendary leaderboard golf titles on 8-bit machines and Link's series of games on 16-bit systems. It includes a full 18-hole San Diego Torrey Pines South course, and up to 8 players can compete in this beautiful 256 colors high-resolution golfing bonanza. There's 14 clubs available, tee of positions for rookie, amateur and pro golfers, covering all possible player skills, and the game even allows for adding an extra courses through Access Software's Link's Golf add-on. Microsoft Golf is an incredibly fun and fulfilling golfing experience, even if it only comes with one pre-built course. So if you're a fan of a sport or enjoy an occasional round, you're gonna love it. I would even risk saying that it was the best golf game on PC in 1993. Myst is a first-person perspective point-and-click adventure game. You play as character simply known as the Stranger, who has been sucked in through the magical book into a mysterious island world of Myst, and you will have to uncover all of the island's secrets and solve its numerous, often mechanical puzzles. Myst is not a game for kids, and not because it portrays nudity or violence, cause it doesn't. In fact, you can't even die in Myst. It's not a game for kids because most of its puzzles are actually pretty challenging and requiring you to pay attention to anything and everything you come across, gathering clues spread more or less obviously within the game world, and then use the knowledge obtained to work out and solve the puzzles within various devices. As you uncover the island's secrets, you'll get to travel using other books to different time ages and experience them too. The game world is displayed using mostly static images and operated with just a mouse cursor and no verbs, icons or anything else. The game overall is an experience rather than the exercise in overly and needlessly complicated control interfaces. If you enjoy demanding adventure games or consider yourself a smart and logically thinking person, try Myst out, you're not going to be disappointed. Pepper's Adventures in Time is a second in today's video semi-educational point-and-click adventure game from Sierra, and also an excellent one. I have to admit that while I was never a fan of their early adventure titles using text parsers, I really enjoyed their later games, those that used mouse interface and did not force you to participate in typing exercises. I still don't think that they're as good as LucasArts' games were, but they are pretty darn close. As the title suggests, you play as Pepper, a young red-haired lassie that gets involved in her evil uncle's Ed's crazy time-traveling scheme. Oh my god, I said lassie. Cringe, cringe, cringe. Batman, edit that out, buddy, don't let them hear me say it. Thanks. Ed plans on changing the past to affect the future and secure his line superiority in it. So when Pepper and her dog get sucked into a time portal and lands in colonial times, she knows that she has to deal with the situation herself. And since her dog got stolen upon arrival in the past, she needs to save both, her puppy Lockjaw and America. Sounds epic, I know, but same as the EcoQuest sequel, Pepper's Adventures in Time is directed towards younger audiences, so all the puzzles that you'll encounter will usually be based in pure but simple logic without any trial and error shenanigans. The story and characters that you'll meet are so fun though, that any fans of the genre, whether they want to or not, will love the game. Oh, and as you can see, the graphics are of very high quality and a little abstract, similar to LucasArts' Day of the Tentacle in this regard. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is an extremely bad game in all aspects. Literally just a tiny bit better than the infamous Pro Soccer 2190. Come to think of it, calling it a game may be a stretch, and honestly I can't think of a single good thing to say about it. Other than luckily it's not the aforementioned Pro Soccer. But it's hardly a good thing about it, rather a bad one about the different title. I don't think anyone will particularly like Plumbers, the game, not the workers, and it's only here to serve as an example of how oversaturated the market was in the early 90s with rushed, cheap and often shallow digitized graphics games. What's worse, it's not really even an FMV game either, as it has maybe a couple of these sequences tops and is mostly showing still images with a terrible voiceover. And these pictures are not great at all. They're badly filtered, awfully framed and generally speaking visually unimpressive. In essence, it's supposed to be a dating simulator, but there's very limited interaction and mind-numbingly boring story. Imagine this, you're a plumber that's down on his luck when it comes to his love life and you need to romance a young blonde going by the name of Jane. At any given point you have a set of choices and as soon as you see them, you'll know which answer is correct, or rather, which game wants you to pick. So completing the whole fair, even as boring as this one, is a breeze. And even if you manage somehow to pick a bad choice, the game will give you a takeover and return you to the point where you'll be able to pick the correct one. Can you see now while I was hesitant on calling it a game? You can't even make the wrong choice and face the consequences. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is an 18+ title, which is even more weird than the whole crappy rest of it. Cause while it tackles subject of romance, there's no obscenities in it, no serious violence and even no real nudity whatsoever. If I was you, I would not only avoid it but also erase it from your memory forever, not to waste any of it on the title alone. But if I was you, you would be me, and I'm not sure that my assistant would take kindly to that change. Especially that he's grown accustomed to the layout of my home and learned all the fastest routes to the fridge and toilet, so it would inconvenience him a lot to move again. So, that's the first episode of our new series done. What do you think of the games? For me, it's a mixed bag if I'm to be honest. Some were really amazing while others were utter crap, but I suppose that's early Windows for you. But while it started the way it did, believe you me, the further we go in the series, the better the games we'll get to see. I have a special one planned for one of the 1995's episodes, as one of my all-time favorites released then, and it's a game most people never heard of. So it's also an excellent title for the possible not yet planned or confirmed obscure Windows games video. a true hidden gem with incredible MIDI soundtrack. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well, then there's thumbs down there too, but I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting the bell, that is. And that bell is amazing, as whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you small and friendly notification about it so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and members also get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're all amazing and stars among the retro community and deserve your subscription. They all have mine. You'll find names of the channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.